So hi guys, we've had some seriously crazy weather recently. Lots of wind, lots of rain, and a few other things thrown in as well. Basically, managed to have a little bit of sunshine, so I made the most of it by driving up to Beachy Head and then down to Birling Gap to get some surfers and some birds in flight. It's one of my favourite places up on Beachy Head. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a suicide spot, but the rest of it is absolutely beautiful. Sunset, sunrise, winter, summer. It has so many different looks through the year, and then there's the road. So if you've got a car that you really like driving, the twists and the bends and the way the road is actually built and everything is actually really good, and it's actually just a nice place to be just for a drive. They do a lot of car magazine shoots up there, and it's just a stunning area. So I arrived at Birling Gap, and it's literally like a wind corridor through this place. It's sort of the dip down almost to sea level, a very small cliff, and there's a walkway down to the beach, which they generally shut off. But I mean, they can't really stop you going down. But for me, I just stayed up the top because I had a good view down on the surface. Sony Rx10 Mark IV, so utilising that and its 600mm reach. Unfortunately, the wind was absolutely vicious. I don't get cold at all. I was wearing a windstopper jacket and everything. My hands don't get cold very easily, but it started getting to me after about 25-30 minutes. But the sun was nice, the light was quite soft and very pleasant, and basically it was behaving quite nicely as a windy day. The light was pretty good and usable, so this is where I started snapping. Alright guys, as you can see, down at the Birling Gap, where it's absolutely ferocious, I don't even know if you can hear me. Surfers are out, absolutely on. We expect to help, my hair's like, woo! Absolutely mad, absolutely mad. Bit of a rock fall as well. Metal detectors are out. Rx10 Mark IV. Get some surfers, slow motion, and stills, and video. Alright, enough of that wind. It was vicious. It doesn't look all that bad actually, but it was just a constant pressure. As you can see out in the distance there, the surfers were enjoying life, I think. When I did speak to a couple when they came back, they said it was bloody chilly, and I thought, braver than I am, and a bit more crazy as well. But yeah, basically got some quite not bad. I mean, the waves aren't huge compared to a lot of places around the world, but they were still enjoying it and still getting some quite good surfing in. But yeah, I mean, some slow motion here, 250 frames a second, f5.6, just to make sure everything is nice and sharp. And yeah, it works really quite well. This is at 4K, 24p that one, but the metal detector guys are out and about having a look at the beach. The surfers are obviously out and about. There's other people walking around as well. Sort of everything was, even though it was generally quite a horrible day, there was actually more people out than I expected. I mean, I'm the person who will be out shooting in all weathers all the way through the year, from minus 15 degrees Celsius up to, moody rain to wind. Hot days, yeah, but generally we do that in the morning or the evening is better for those sort of days. But in the winter and moody days, I'm always out and about trying to get something that no one else is going to capture because they don't want to venture out into that weather. So another 250 frames a second shot there, and it was just like the waves weren't all that clean in sometimes. Sometimes they were, sometimes they were just like mashed up like this. But obviously they're trying their best. Some not going to quite to plan as they expected, but about 1,000 times better than I would probably ever do. A few seagulls still flying around. This is where the Rx10 had a bit of a moment. I think it's because I was at 600mm zoomed right out on the surfers, and obviously in video it takes a little bit of time to back out on the autofocus, where in stills mode it's much faster. This guy here surfing really quite good. He was up quite regularly, but still capturing some really cool sort of little crashes, I suppose. This one here is at 250. Yeah, again, just works really quite well. Unfortunately, the light was going, so I couldn't really push it to 500 frames per second. Not without upping the ISO too much, but I did one, I think, which I think comes up shortly. But yeah, no. All in all, not a bad afternoon really. Quite impressed with how they were surfing, and just the way the wind and everything was. Just a shame the skies were not all that nice. But at least the light itself was nicely diffused, but not too much. So I didn't have any light to play with, kind of thing. Which I did for a period of time before obviously it started to go more into the sunset kind of time. But the surfers really making the most of it. Onto the stills now. So, like I say, 600mm to play with. Quite happily reaching far enough to get the photos. Not a problem at all. This guy going back out. Super sharp f4 600mm. Still back down at ISO 100. This is where the advantage lies. If you're using a 150 to 600mm Sigma, for example, you're at f6.3. So your shut speeds are going to be struggling, or you're going to have to start cranking your ISO up. Keeping the Rx10 Mark IV down at ISO 100 as much as you can gives you really clean shots, and even against something like the A6300, A6500 or A6400, you're still getting cleaner shots than you would do if you were running the 150 to 600 on one of those bodies. Couldn't really compare too much against a full frame body, but in experience I don't really miss not having a large lens on the big bodies anymore. Rx10 Mark IV can go up to ISO 1000 quite happily. 800 is absolutely fine. 1000 you've got to start putting a little bit of noise reduction in, and it kind of shows sometimes, but in shots like this they just work quite well, especially in black and white. It just added a bit more feel to the shots, I suppose, and the contrast, because obviously where they're wearing black and the water splashing around is quite white, and you get some quite good reflections actually down on the water's surface, which is quite cool. But like I say, they were enjoying themselves even though it must have been freezing, and capturing stuff like this in a handheld camera that is doing 24 frames per second when you want it to it's a winner. And then when you can start doing slow motion video as well, it's absolutely awesome. And this is where I hope Sony, when they bring out the Mark V Rx10, so the Rx10 Mark V, I'm hoping they improve the slow motion capability, a few more megapixels so we can crop in a little bit more. So still the same lens would be fine, just a bit more croppability would be quite a handy thing. But as you can see, autofocus and everything absolutely fine. This is shot at 100 frames per second HD, which gives you a little bit of slow motion, makes that bird look a little bit more graceful in the air, because even though he was getting buffeted about, it was quite cool. But yeah, I mean, autofocus on this one was absolutely fine. Just earlier on, I think he came so close to me at 600mm, I couldn't actually focus on him fast enough in video mode. If it was in stills, I would have been straight on it. It wasn't be a problem. But video autofocusing speeds are different than stills. So, but yeah, then on to the birds actually diving in. Well, not diving in, sort of landing on water or walking on water to grab little bits of food or fish or whatever. They were doing that quite a lot, which works quite well in slow motion. So 250 frames per second, and it just looks they look really graceful. It's quite interesting watching them. This shot here, I also focus actually working, which I was quite impressed about, and it's bang on. 600mm f4, no cropping or anything like that. And the same again for this one. I was like, hang on a minute, it works on seagulls in flight. I'm not going to moan. So that worked quite well. This shot here is pretty cool, and I've got about 5 or 6 shots leading up to the point, and then 5 or 6 shots the other side of that, which all happened within a second or so. This shot here was quite cool. I was just following it while the wave crashed up in the background, which worked quite nicely. It just shows you they fly so close to the water, it's nuts. And then off the shore of Brighton, you've actually got the wind turbines, a massive load of wind turbines, which are pretty new. So the sun was going down, and they're just off. They're actually roughly below the sun, of the distance over there. This is the cliffs along Birling Gap. One of the surfers coming up the stairs where I was, and yeah, really good actually. Not a bad day all in all. Absolutely freezing. And I say I don't really get cold, but it was pushing the cooler temperatures on the wind chill factor. And then obviously a little reminder to everyone: if you do go up on these high cliffs or anything like that, they're made of chalk, so they're very fragile. And in weather like this, they can collapse. So when people like this are walking along the edge of the cliffs, please don't, because bad things could happen. One, you could either get blown off, or two, if that cliff decides to fail, that's it. It's your time is over, unfortunately. But anyway, guys, please subscribe. Please click the notification bell, and hopefully my voice doesn't sound too croaky. A bit of a cold going on. But yeah, please ask questions. Rx10 Mark IV, anything like that. You know, the stuff I use, settings, blah blah blah. Feel free to ask, and I shall see you soon for another video. Any ideas you might like me to try, or any things you're stuck with on the Rx10 Mark IV, give us a shout and I'll see what I can do.